Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read S3 3136 Journey to the Undersea Gardens by Margaret Klein, Rachel Griffiths, and Cynthia Benjamin. The Garden. This is a true story of a strange place called the Rose Garden. It is unlikely any garden you have ever seen. This garden grew at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Scientists found the Rose Garden in 1979. They visited it again several times after that. People have wondered what is at the bottom of the deep ocean for hundreds of years. Deep sea exploration began many years before the Rose Garden was found. Discoveries like this help scientists understand how the earth and ocean work. Exploring the seafloor. One early journey to the bottom of the ocean was in 1974. On this trip, a team of French and American scientists explored the seafloor of the Atlantic Ocean. One purpose of the trip was to look for hot springs. The scientists knew that on land, hot springs are found near volcanoes. There are also volcanoes on the seafloor. So the researchers thought there might be hot springs on the seafloor. Hot springs at Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, USA. Seafloor hot springs. The seafloor hot springs are also called vents. They happen when seawater is heated by hot rocks in the Earth's ocean crust. Sometimes the seawater flows from cracks. Long tubes like chimneys sometimes form above the hot springs. The scientists searched areas of the floor of the Atlantic Ocean in small submarines. They found some underwater volcanoes. The team saw lava, rock all around the volcanoes, but they did not find any hot springs. So scientists kept studying the ocean. Site of 1977 and 1979 expeditions, area of exploration. Galapagos Islands. In 1977, researchers were working in the Pacific Ocean. They found an area of the seafloor near the Galapagos Islands where the temperature was cooler than it should have been. Scientists found hot springs in this area. After exploring the hot springs, they also thought the vents might be a clue to explain how seawater is heated in the Earth's crust. So in 1979, researchers decided to take another journey to the Pacific Ocean to learn more about the seafloor. An amazing discovery. The expedition took place in February 1979. The people on this trip were from the United States. The group traveled by ship to the area northeast of the Galapagos Islands. The ship carried a small submarine on board. The submarine was called Alvin. The group made several dives down to the bottom of the ocean in Alvin. Alvin is a submarine that holds 3 people. It has 3 portholes or windows. The submarine also carries lights and cameras for taking pictures on the water. Alvin was launched into the water from the back of a ship. Alvin traveled slowly. It took about 2 hours for the submarine to reach the seafloor. The pilot steered Alvin to the bottom of the ocean. The seafloor was about 3 kilometers below the surface. When the crew looked out of the portholes, it was totally dark. That's because there is no sunlight in the deep parts of the ocean. The crew had to use lights to see objects deep under the ocean. The lights allowed them to see out of the portholes. They saw many different kinds of fish and jellyfish on their dives. On one dive, the scientists saw the seafloor hot springs. However, that wasn't all they found. on the sea floor around the hot springs was the biggest surprise of all. The scientists saw colorful jellyfish out of the portholes on their way down to the seafloor. Scientists were amazed to find clusters of animals living close to the vents. The animals were strange-looking creatures. Many had never been seen before this trip. We came upon a fabulous scene, said scientist John Edmond. We saw reefs of mussels and fields of giant clams. Mussels, lava rock, giant clam, a tube worm. One kind of animal that lives near the vent is a giant clam. These clams are more than 30 centimeters long. Perhaps the strangest animal is the tube worm. It lives in a long white tube that is red at the top. Tube worms sway in the water like flowers in a gentle breeze. Tube worms are sea worms. They can grow up to 2 meters long. They do not have mouth, eyes, or stomachs. The chemicals from the underwater vents help to keep the animals alive. The scientists were surprised by this discovery because the animals around the vent lived in a very different way. They survived without sunlight. Scientists discovered that something else kept the animals alive. They found chemicals in the hot water. The chemicals came out of the hot springs. The animals that lived around the vent were kept alive by chemicals in the water rather than sunlight. Some of the smallest forms of life in the ocean used the chemicals to manufacture food. The large animals near the vent then ate the smaller life forms and other small animals that lived nearby. Animals called spaghetti worms lived near the vent. Tube worms bloomed in the rose garden. Scientists named this place the Rose Garden because the tube worms looked like roses. During the exploration, water and rock samples were collected. Scientists also took many photos. This information helped others study the rose garden more carefully. At the end of their visit, the group left behind markers to mark the places they had studied. This way, us other scientists knew where to return. Over the years, researchers returned to the Undersea Garden several times. They wanted to find out more about the animals. Each time they left more markers to enable researchers to find the rose garden in the future. Markers helped the scientists return to the rose garden. Return to the Rose Garden, 2002. A new group of American scientists returned to the Rose Garden in 2002. They wanted to see how the animals had changed. They also wanted to look for new animals and make more detailed maps. There was still so much to learn about the vent community. Scientists gathered on board the ship Atlantis near the Galapagos Island. Alvin pilot Phil Forte and scientist Tim Shank worked inside Alvin. The expedition began on 24th May 2002 and lasted 12 days. About 50 people worked together, including scientists, the ship's crew, and engineers. Alvin was used again for the trip. Alvin's engineers made sure that the submarine was ready to explore the ocean floor. Alvin moved across the ocean floor as the scientists looked for the rose garden. However, the markers were gone. The rose garden seemed to have disappeared. Alvin was in the right place, but the crew inside couldn't see the rose garden. Instead, they saw a folded lava rock on the seafloor. Dan Fenardi, one of the scientists on the trip, said the rose garden may have been paved over by a fast-moving river of lava. Lava rock was found on the ocean floor. Young animals living around a new vent surprised scientists. Then the crew in Albion saw something exciting. They discovered a new undersea vent. This vent was in the new lava that had covered over the rose garden. A new group of young animals lived around this vent. The research team thought that this new vent was recently formed because the lava was fresh. They also found very young clams and mussels in the area. Some of the tube worms were only 3 centimeters long. The scientists believed that this new vent was less than 2 years old. This was important because this new group of animals could be studied as it grew and changed. The team named this new area Rosebud. One day it might grow into another rose garden. Pink, bathytid fish, albino carried shrimp, young animals lived near the lava of Rosebud. Alvin moved back and forth along the sea floor in the area. The scientists collected many samples of animals, water, and rocks, and took many photos of Rosebud. Alvin's robot arm collected samples from the sea floor. Now scientists are studying the animals and other samples from Rosebud. One day, researchers will return to the Undersea Garden. They may make further finds. Maybe they will find more gardens or other unknown animals. They know there is more to discover beneath the ocean surface. Scientists Tim Shank and Ryan Waller studied the clams that Alvin collected. Dan Fenari is an expert in using deep-sea vehicles to explore the seafloor. He's also a marine geologist. He went on the expedition where they found Rosebud with Tim Shank and Steve Hammett. Dan and Susan Humphreys and Daniel Fino put together this website about exploring the seafloor. The end.